So one of the issues that Dr. King was very concerned with, and those who carry on his work throughout this country have focused on, is the issue of incarceration. And at CBST, for our Dr. King observances each year, we try to bring different people to speak that are also dealing with issues that are today contemporary issues of our world that Dr. King would certainly want us to be focusing on. And many have spoken, and I don't need to repeat it, that celebrating Dr. King means not just turning him into some kind of historical plastic figure, but to really trying to live his ideals and his prophetic words to all of us, which means confronting the all too many profound issues facing our society today. And one of those issues is the situation of prisons and jails in this country. This country imprisons more people than any other country per capita in the world. It's a spectacular reality that we experience here. And our CBST member, Evie Litwok, has been incarcerated, and she has made her life's work since getting out of prison to create something called the Suitcase Project, which she's going to talk about tonight, to help those who leave prison. Somewhere between 650,000 to 750,000 people a year leave prison every year in these United States. We give them, as a country, no support, no way to re-enter society with economic, job training, et cetera, et cetera. You can imagine a huge number of those hundreds of thousands of people end up back in jail again. So Evie's created a project, which I hope she'll talk about a little bit tonight, but after services, we're gonna have an ONEG program where she'll describe it even more, and the importance of creating some attempt to make those who are leaving prison and jail to be welcomed back into society and supported in a way that can make it possible to live as a full citizen. So I'm really thrilled that Evie is with us tonight to talk in honor of Dr. King's Shabbat celebration, to help us get more thoughtful, more caring, more aware of what is really a plague of our current society. So I'm thrilled to welcome Evie Litwok, and Evie is here with her beloved Allie, who is going to stay there. Right. And so I'm really thrilled to welcome Evie, who has spoken at CBST before, and we think it's so appropriate that she's sharing some of her thoughts tonight with us today. Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. I was here last night, so for those of you who've heard my introduction, please forgive me. But first I want to thank Rabbi Kleinbaum, Rabbi James, for inviting me to speak at CBST. I must also thank Rabbi Kleinbaum for being one of the people in my life who saved mine and Allie's life. I am very, very grateful. I'm a formerly incarcerated Jewish lesbian and a child of 2 survivors of the Holocaust. I spent time in 2 federal prisons and solitary confinement. I want to introduce my friend Chastity Nasworthy, sitting in the front row, who is 9 days newly released from prison and jail, and I will be talking about how we helped her hopefully make a seamless exit from prison, albeit still difficult. I am honored to celebrate the life of Martin Luther King. His death, unfortunately, in 1968 also marked the first period of time the federal government entered into a national crime policy and diverted billions of dollars from anti-poverty programs, social welfare programs, educational programs, into systems of punishment and locking up impoverished Black and brown people. People do not remember that this, in fact, started in 1968 and started after his death. In the 50 years since his death, we've seen the death of urban education, increased poverty, homelessness, income equality. The richest 1% own 38% of all private wealth. The bottom 90 own 73% of all debt. According to the New York Times, the richest 1% now own more wealth than the bottom 90%. And mass incarceration from the time of Dr. King's death went from 170,000 to 2.3 million today. His letter, which many people quote on his birthday, and there are elements, I have read and reread this letter, and I'm always surprised at the things that I pick up. So here's one of the quotes, but it won't be what I focus on, but it's a quote I think is very important. More and more I feel that the people of ill will have used their time much more effectively than the people of goodwill. I just can't get that notion out of my head, especially in the era of Trump. Martin Luther King had a 4-step strategy for his non-violent campaign. He wrote the letter from Birmingham to white moderates who he believed fell short of the 4-step campaign. They were willing to go only so far. They were willing to collect the facts to determine where injustice exists. They were willing to negotiate. Some were willing to self-purify. But the last step, the direct action, the one that we must pursue to destroy mass incarceration and anything else that we need to do, is the one step that he saw that his white moderate allies failed to do. So, collection of facts to determine there's injustice. Negotiation. We have tried in mass incarceration for decades to undo the draconian Rockefeller laws and those laws passed during Reagan and the Clinton years, which expanded sentencing. Try to remember that people tend to date back the problems of mass incarceration to Clinton in the 1990s. You need to date it back to 1968 and Rockefeller. It started way before. Self-purification. Dr. King asked his white moderate friends, are you able to accept blows without retaliating? Are you able to endure the ordeals of jail? But the 4th step, and I'm going to read exactly what he says because I think word for word it has meaning. Nonviolent direct action seeks to create such a crisis and fosters such a tension that a community which has constantly refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issue. It seeks to dramatize the issue so that it cannot be ignored. I think this is very important, particularly in the era of Trump. We have not dramatized enough the issue of mass incarceration. Direct action is exactly what I need, and I will give you an example. There has been much fuss made about the closing of Rikers Island. There were probably more than 2 camps, but I was in one of the 2 camps. As far as I'm concerned, the deal that was cut, which was negotiated, which only went to Dr. King's second point, was that Rikers would be closed in 10 years and that jails, which are already built in the 5 boroughs, all of them are built, would be put in place. I'm absolutely opposed to the building of a single jail. I'm absolutely for blowing them up and finding a different way to deal with punishment and crime. But people who settled for closing Rikers that way didn't realize they were going to increase the population. My choice would have been to go to direct action and have 1,000 or 5,000 people stand in front of the bridge that leads to Rikers every day until, as Dr. King said, and I'll keep this out, to create the tension and to dramatize the issue so that it could no longer be ignored. And I think we have to think that way when we want to make change. 65% of the people on Rikers Island have violated probation technically. Now, for you to understand, do not be confused when people tell you we have so much recidivism. Recidivism meaning people going back to prison, trying to give you the illusion that they're doing crimes. They are not doing crimes. They are failing drug tests. I ate a poppy seed bagel. I was not convicted on drugs. I don't tend to do a lot of drugs. And when I was on probation, I wanted to go visit my mother in New Jersey. I had to get permission from my probation officer. I went in to do a urine, which I had to do every so often, and came back positive. And I went, no, I said, how could that be? And she made me come in the next day. It came back positive. And I said, I want to see my doctor. I want to do a blood test. I don't take drugs. So finally we figured out I was eating poppy seed bagels, and poppies come up as dirty urine. And so it's like, really? So medication you take, poppy seed bagels can come up as dirty urine. And if you're on probation, they don't care if you ate a poppy seed bagel or if you smoked a joint, you're going back to prison. So Rikers Island is not needed. We don't need 5 new jails. The areas that I want to focus on in connection to this 4-step theories are the Trump shutdown, mass incarceration as the biggest or one of the biggest employers in the United States. And I'm going to take you through a little journey with me so that you get the sense of just how many people are employed under millions under mass incarceration. Preventing entry, probably the most important thing is to prevent entry into the justice system before anyone gets involved, and doing reentry differently. And on all these 4 things, we have not collected our data. We have not done any of Martin Luther King's step. We're not even close. Nobody knows how many people are employed by this entire industry. If I tell you it's $62 billion, would you be surprised? The Trump shutdown, as we stand here today, in New York, in MDC Prison, the people have gone on strike because the shutdown, and the shutdown, remember, if whatever affects this one prison is affecting thousands of prisons and millions of people. The shutdown has caused a staff shortage. The shutdown has caused them to close visitation. You close visitation, you're closing people's lifeline to their family and their friends and their emotional stability. So as we stand here today, less than 20 blocks from here, people are on a hunger strike. And how many people how many people are standing by these people? In the time of the shutdown, if we had 1,000 people to create a crisis and foster the tension and make people aware, how many articles without the support of all of you sitting here, of all of everybody saying, these people are not going to get their medication. These are diabetics, these have heart disease, people have seizures. It's not only visitation, it's they may not get food. So when we talk about mass incarceration, people tend to focus on bail reform or this or that, or pick out 2 issues. What I'm here to tell you is I could stand here for a week without exaggeration, and I wouldn't be done with all the tentacles that mass incarceration has. So, as I said, it's one of the biggest. I'm going to take you through my journey, a piece of my journey, to show you the sheer number of people. And what I will tell you is there is not even the collection of this kind of data, because they employ police officers, pre- and post-trial officers, marshals, sheriffs, and the justice, prisoner, and alien transportation system. How many people have ever heard of that? Okay, we got one. So this is from, thank you, the U.S. Marshals Service website. Managed by the Marshal Service, Jpacks is the largest transporter of prisoners in the world, handling 715 requests every day, 715 a day, to move prisoners from judicial districts and correctional institutions. This is an incredible racket. The transportation system, which is almost never talked about, makes billions. I did not know that such a thing even existed until one early morning in 2014. I was facing my 2nd incarceration, had to find a place for Allie and my stuff. A friend suggested another friend to watch her. I was sleeping on her couch in the living room that day, dreaming about the whitefish and the bagel that I would have at Ron Cohen's and Joe Watkinson's house for breaking the fast, because it was the day of Erev Yom Kippur. And while I was dreaming about that bagel, my dreams were cut short when Ellie started barking at the 4 officers, 3 men and a woman, that were at the bay window outside of where I was sleeping. They signaled me to open the door. They immediately surrounded me with guns drawn. I'm like 5 feet, wearing a nightgown with everything hanging out. They're like 6 feet. And intensely, I think they must train them in how to not move a muscle in their face. They're all like, and I said to them, who do you think I am, Al Capone? Nothing. I got nothing. I didn't know why they were there to pick me up. I had self-surrendered before without a problem. I said, you're making a mistake. I appealed to the Second Circuit to have knee surgery before I went to prison, and one of the guys looked at me, again, not moving a muscle in his face, and said, we don't make mistakes. So here's a day I'd awoken dreaming of whitefish, and I looked at the officers seriously, and I said, it's my holiday. Can I come next week? And they looked at me like, are you kidding me? You know, no. So I ended up sitting in a cold cell most of the day, being upset that I missed synagogue, and I was put in Brooklyn Detention. Those of you who don't know, we have a detention facility for decades that houses a couple 100 women and about 1,000 men that are waiting to plead guilty to be deported. So people are there. I met 100 women. Most of them were there an average of 3 to 4 years in this one room that's smaller than this, with double beds cramped on top of each other, and brutal situation. This should be an area of crisis, and we should dramatize this issue, because all you need to do is get, judges to have them plead guilty and get them out of there. They don't need to live in this kind of torture. So here's the torture. An officer came in every day, and she said, I get a pizza for every pathetic inmate I put in solitary, and I want 3 pizzas today. And she gets them, because she'll stand there and annoy you until you talk back. And if you talk back, you're going to solitary. And she always won the number of pizzas. Now, my journey from the courthouse to my designated prison, which was FCI Tallahassee, should have been done in an afternoon. Instead, it took 1 month. And it's during this month that you realize how profitable prisons are. And that's wholly separate from the people in prison. So instead of, I started off at, Brooklyn, and I was taken through a series of prison and transport that serves no purpose but to make money. So out of Brooklyn, they put me in a GEO private prison car. It was the first time in my life I was not only shackled, but something called a black box was put on my hands. Your handcuffs are like, your cuffs like this, and then to make sure that your hands are completely disabled. Now, I was accused of tax evasion. I was not gonna hurt anybody, and I was old. Yet they black boxed me, meaning they put a black box on my hands to make it immobile, and it almost broke my wrists. And that's a weapon of mass destruction, which is an issue on the list that should be not permitted. Now, once full, they took us to Stewart International Airport, where as I was approaching, that's where Con Air is. People come from 7 states to Stewart International Airport, and they, okay, I'm getting signal. Oh boy. All right. Let me see. I'll shorten my comments. When I saw what was going on, there were 50 people standing. We were waiting for 100 people. There were 20 officers carrying machine guns that were full body. And there was 1 officer for every person, sheriff, law enforcement. And I thought to myself, who are these people expecting? El Chapo? I mean, we were old people going to federal prison. Okay, let me see where I want to go to. So we flew to Oklahoma, and what I discovered is there's a prison in Oklahoma called Oklahoma Transit. And no matter where you are going in the federal system, whether it's from Virginia to West Virginia, New York to California, wherever you're going to Oklahoma Transit first. There's no reason for that prison. It just, everybody's put there. Whoever's got this, whoever was the governor of Oklahoma at the time got a big deal. All right, so I'm gonna cut this to go to my next point. So transportation money-making market is fantastic, and it's not on anybody's radar. But reentry is on everybody's radar, but not in the right way. Reentry is something that should never begin after you come home. If reentry begins after you've come home, you're already in a rat-infested shelter in the Bronx, like Chastity was just at, and you're in a position where after they've given you your $30, you've used it, and you can't leave the shelter because you don't have a Metro card. You can't go for a job interview because you have no money for transportation, and you can't eat because you have no money for food. So the $100 million that is spent in reentry provides services that are not direct enough. When I came out of prison, I was homeless for 16 months. I was penniless. And I started speaking at synagogues, and I realized when I spoke, people said to me, what can we do? And I tried to come up with something very pragmatic, and I said, okay, we're gonna do the Suitcase Project. When people come home, they need a phone with minutes for a year because they need to be able to communicate with people. Otherwise, they're isolated. 2, they need a computer so they can look for jobs. And 3, they need gift certificates so that they can buy clothing and toiletries. But what I didn't think about, and Chastity is the recipient of the first suitcase. She came out 9 days ago. Rabbi Lauren Grabel-Herman and some members of SAJ, we met her. She was met by filmmakers that I sent to pick her up at prison. She came down to my apartment, and then we took her out for lunch, and we've been in contact with her every day for the 9 days. And even with all that I thought, I realized we didn't give her a Metro card, we didn't give her cash, and every day is a struggle, even with our support, but at least she has a community of people, and I'm hoping CBST will take one person. I have in my pocketbook, I forgot to bring it up, dozens of letters. I get 6 a day. Now that people know the Suitcase Project is around, there's more need than I can handle, and I need synagogues across New York to help. So, I want to thank you for listening. Sincerely hope you get involved, and keep talking about mass incarceration. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sometimes it's really important for us to listen to somebody who has a profoundly different life experience and open our minds and our eyes to something in the world that we might not know anything about. So after services, for those who want to get into deeper conversation with Evie, and for those who might want to get involved with the Suitcase Project, SAJ and Rabbi Lauren Grabel-Herman, as Evie mentioned, who was an intern here at CBSE for 2 years, they took on this project, and you are the results, which is fabulous that you're here. So for those who want to talk about it after services, Oneg, I'm not sure which room it's in? Chapel. In the chapel, to have more conversation about this. And there are things that we can always do, which is to take one step at a time, to learn more, to be more deeply aware, to be more deeply knowledgeable, and now we have a practical project to take on.